Well, hello. Welcome to a very special Third Pillar Thursday of mine. Um, Today, I'm going to try something a little different. Today we're going to talk about plains and grasslands, and for those who are seeing this, I'm going to do a live page through for because this is the 8th release from Critical Hit Publishing in the cinematic environs. And of course, this is my passion project. So as well as talking to you, I'm going to juggle this a little bit. I'm going to have the chat open as well as do a live page through the book so we can just talk about these things. Everything that's in the book, talk about using the environment, and especially talking about plains and grasslands, because essentially we kind of consider this to be like the flyover country, right? It's the hand wave element of gaming, and we tend to we tend to think of it as more or less the environment that is it's the most boring. It's like, okay, let's just get to the action. And it is my intention to prove to everyone that the environment is not that boring, right? It is an absolute positively excellent tool by the DM, and I think it's been underserved. So anyone who is able to post any comment in the chat, please tell me what it is you see. What I'm trying to show to you is a big giant picture of like a blue background with the kind of a yellowish, a lime green Davabrian Jackson cinematic environs, and the chat is on the side. So I can keep track of the chat and then kind of page through this with you at the same time. Hey, Carol, what's going on? Thank you for joining me so early in the morning. Yes, if you could, if anyone can say, yeah, I see that big giant cinematic environs, that I will continue. That's what you see. Perfect. And if you can hear me, of course, as well. All right, so let's get into it. Using the environment. So this release, this is our 8th release in the series, and the cinematic environs. Of course, this is the logo. Of course, it's done in different shades and that kind of thing. But my dog wanted out. I won't be here long. Carol, believe me, I completely understand. I've got cats, but you're so silly. I can't hear anything, and I just keep screaming over and over again. Why can't anybody hear me? No, anyway. That's our logo right at the bottom, Critical Hit Publishing, with a big eyeball stuck in a thing of blood. But anyway, using each book is written, of course, about a specific environment. So we've got like aquatic depths and Arctic reaches and mountains and that kind of thing. And we will eventually do every natural environment and then flow into the mystical realm. Of course, we've got our credits. There's the 3 of us, me, DBJ, Alex, and Rob, as well as doing everything. I have to pause here just a minute. It's not the most exciting part of it. Prue, I absolutely agree with you. Good morning, Grandma. She's the most, Carol's the most positive, supportive member of the community. And morning, Prue, thank you very much for joining me. Yeah, I'm just going to do an electronic page through and then a kind of a talk over. And of course, if anyone has any comments, questions, would have come up with some story ideas and all that kind of crap. As far as this newest release and using the cinematic environments anyway. And of course, for those who've never seen it or what it's about, because I talk about it, but maybe people haven't visually seen it. So in the book, the first couple of pages are reprinted for each book. It's a way so that you don't have to page flip. And so we have our introduction. We have the general rule of 3. The rule of 3 has been used as a moniker in various different situations. But in our rule of 3, it basically describes using realistic, gritty, or cinematic themes in your world and how many die rolls would apply to kind of get that feeling. Oh, you're leaving for AtCon. Oh man, oh, I want to fly out there so bad. I'm in Ohio, so yeah, I have to do that. Vincent Shine, greetings from Germany again. What's going on there, dude? Um, if dude you are, yeah, yeah. You know what? I agree with Carol. I wish I could go too. Oh, those guys have always been supportive of me. I don't tend to spread information, but I've known them for years, and they've reached out to me, and I've reached out to them in so many ways. Here we go. Let's see. All right. So anyway, rule of three. Um, Long story short is when the players are in danger and they are reacting to the environment or situation, allowing them to basically pull their ass out of the fire. Do you allow one, two, or three rolls? So let's say there's a rickety old bridge and they're crossing the rickety old rope bridge. Do you allow just one, I don't know, dexterity saving throw where they fall to their death? Do you allow them, if they miss the dexterity saving throw, do you allow a second roll, maybe for like strength or something, to hold on by their fingertips? Or do you allow three rolls? Let's say they miss hanging on their fingertips. Maybe the last roll allows them to, dangle by their ankle as the ankle gets caught into a root or something, or a frayed rope. And so depending on how many rolls you allow would be kind of give a feeling of whether you want a very realistic, like, one and done, or OSR type of deal, or whether you want to have two rolls, which is kind of gritty, or three saves, which would be more cinematic, where even the strangest things come out of the woodwork. All right, so um, you give them three. Yeah, Carol says she's I'm a friendly DM. My players are spoiled rotten. I give them three. And it's not it's it it's not whether one is good or bad. It's just depending on what kind of theme you want, right? So if you want something high action, and it's not that they won't suffer any harm, but if you want some high action, allowing an extra roll or two to really save themselves, even if there's um, a little bit of a consequence to it, absolutely, it's, use that. Now if you want something very lethal, very gritty, less saves, the better. So anyway, let me page down through here. This also gives, let's get to the top of this page, some explanation of what's going on in the book. So 5 things that we use that I've come up with are pressure, if then, even the odds, changes, and fumble crit. And those 5 elements are kind of a generalized way to break up what it is that makes up the environment and how you can use it. So pressure is based on, like, what is it that will move your players instead of having them, be caught in, analysis paralysis. What is it that you can do in this particular environment to get them to move, to get them to go to action, whether it's good or bad? You guys are talking. Carol says the guys in the chat are talking about how many rolls they prefer or what their default is. Carol says yes. If one rolls a nat 20, they can save someone that has just failed a roll, which is it's a good rule of thumb. I like that. And Vincent Shine says the thing is that failure is oftentimes more interesting than success, and I think it's the yes but or the no and kind of thing. Like, you fail but there's some kind of consequence, or you succeed but there's a consequence attached to it, and just having that happen. So the idea of, like, jumping across a chasm. Do they jump across and then land on the other side, but they they fall down stunned, or do they twist their ankle, or do they knock the wind out of their sails because they land on their abdomen? Do they hang by their fingertips or something like that, and then they have to spin around getting up, or do they fall prone, or something like that? Those things can happen. So we have ourselves pressure. We have if then. If then is just exactly what it sounds like. Like if the players choose to do something, then this other thing happens. I love putting the danger in the players' hands, letting them choose to place themselves and have a situation. If then essentially is like a puzzle. If I do this thing, then this other thing will happen. Even the odds is very simple. When you need a randomizer, whether someone is randomly hit with falling rocks or crumbling earth, or a lightning strike, or what have you, swirling debris in a hurricane. It's even the odds. Basically, you take a die roll, you roll, you want to get an even result. If you get an even result, you're not a target. If you get an odd result, bam, you are a target of said particular difficulty. Changes are so that you can change what's going on in the environment. And then the fumble crit is an idea of, instead of just having a critical success or a fumble and just, oh, you fumble, you drop your weapon. You had a critical success, you do double damage. Instead, we have a table that has environmentally specific results that could really enhance what's going on. But boom, yeah, Vincent Shine says Dungeon World does this all the time, as far as yes and no but, as opposed to a simple pass fail. You can have failure, partial success, and success, and probability tips in the partial success, simply because partial successes are those kind of things that always build far more stories. It's always far more interesting than a straight up pass or fail. Next we have, as we page on, next we have all of our conditions. I love using conditions. It's far better to have people overcome and navigate through conditions than it is hit point loss. Hit points are just another way of, isn't this another resource? But having to navigate your way through conditions, I think, is far better. We also have exhaustion as well as despair, which is the mental version of physical exhaustion. Oh, Carol says, "Dang, I have to drive all day to my brother's house in Seattle." Yeah, Carol. Prue sends out some love to Carol, and I absolutely agree. If you're part of the Facebook group of Absolute Tabletop, you will be able to interact with her and the rest of us plenty of times. Anyway, yes, we do have a despair mechanic, and it operates exactly like exhaustion, where you have various levels, and each of those levels in despair operates and has a particular penalty. So yeah, we have all of our things like, for example, we have a forgetful, frightened, and hallucinations as a possible condition, as well as things like falling prone and that kind of stuff. So so that portion of our book is continuous, because you can just use one book, open it up, and you're done. But now we get into some of the great layout and artwork by Alex, as far as using the planes and such, which I haven't even touched on yet. All right, so here we go with our planes conditions, and this portion of it is basically an extreme overview of the conditions within whatever environment it is. This specifically planes, but this could apply to 99% of the regions that you're going to use within them. Vincent Shine says conditions are interesting, but only if they are paired with other complications. If you can just wait it out or let your cleric heal it, it's not very interesting. I absolutely agree with you. The conditions themselves, things like being prone or stunned or unconscious or paralyzed or whatever, layer on top of the complications of being where you're at. So if you're stunned in a fire, flash fire, if you fall prone in a flash flood, if you become paralyzed, blinded, all those things, and those things create other complications. So, for example, we have things like if you're become stunned or forgetful or confused and whatnot. That's layered on top of combat. That's layered on top of just navigating the dangers of where you're located. So yes, absolutely. If you can just wait it out, well, and that's why we have pressure. We have a suggestion like if you're just going to let your players wait it out, then there's not much pressure involved. But if you have a time frame, then yeah, conditions are important. Poo says, what's the title of this book again, DBJ? Is it Plains and Grasslands? Yes, it is called Plains and Grasslands. The entire series is called Cinematic Environs. Cinematic because I love movies and I love the pulse pounding action you get when you see a movie and people are in a particular unique location, and environs because we're talking about the environment. So yes, this specific book is Plains and Grasslands, and that region. So here with this chapter are plains conditions, and we talk about all kinds of conditions that a game master and players may want to keep in mind when traveling through it. So we have things like dehydration. We talk about dealing with large open spaces. Here we using weather and exposure. We also have a weather chart that we go into, and using the weather itself to motivate the players so that they're not simply just waiting around for something better in their life, that you are using things like heavy rain, sunny and clear, fog, whiteout, thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms, drizzling, freezing rain, snow flurries, and of course the mechanical effects thereof. Poo says, in my RP life, I've had so many DMs that didn't put conditions on top of complications, way more often than the other way around. I use conditions a lot and want to use them even more. And that's the thing, right? My contention is that the third pillar of exploration is using the environment. And what happens the environment is a puzzle, is a layer, it is a trap, and it is part of your setting. And all of that combined together represents a tool that can be used to make things difficult. The puzzle aspect of it is it's not trying to figure out how to do a Rubik's Cube. It is, okay, here's the situation. It's freezing cold. Our wizards' hands have frostbite, so they can't use their somatic spells. On top of which, we are we're in a blizzard and we can't see, and we have to worry about where we step, and we're being hunted by yetis. It's layering those things and learning how to layer them, because it's exercising a muscle that hasn't been really exercised in role-playing games. Vincent Shine says, I learned that part recently. Weirdly enough, the Cypher system taught me that they have this mechanic called GM intrusion, where you offer XP for a condition, and if nothing is going on, it's just boring, right? And Poo says the DMs I've had tend to forget about the environment, at least as soon as the players are out of the dungeon. Exactly. And my point, and my goal, my calling is to say that whether you're in the dungeon or out of it, the environment is always affecting you. So yes, we have ourselves our weather table here, winter, spring, summer, autumn, whether it's arid or savanna, and a percentage thing so that you can use the weather to push the action forward. So for example, if the players must get to the mountain range that's 40 miles away, are they just going to take their leisurely time, or are they going to freeze to death or what have you? Now, I will say in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, there's a lot of easy buttons, right? There's a lot of spells that are, and even background features that's like, oh, I can just feed myself and 4 of my player characters. Da-da-da, I'm done. Or I have create food and water. I don't have to worry about, searching for anything. Or I've got Leomund's tiny hut. I can just create a magical sphere and we're never affected by anything. And that's where, as the DM and the players must work together to talk about, hey, let's not have this in our game because we want more of a survivalist feeling in our world. Just like people who love Dark Sun, it is a survivalist setting. Having the easy button, having an easy fix is something that that you may want to decide that you don't want in this setting, and the players should agree with that. Vincent Shines, nature is out to get you always. We tend to forget that as modern human beings. Always saying resisting the elements, create food and water, healer potions. Yeah, those things. It's an easy button, right? If you're trying to create tension and someone just goes, it's just a cantrip, I just easily fix it. It takes away the tension, and of course, because over time, the world's most popular role-playing game has done that. It's taken out that tool, and gotten, I believe, players used to not having that in their world. And so therefore, when it is introduced, a lot of players will balk at it. But I want to tell you that there's something special about just surviving. That is a, oh man, that is a great feeling in and amongst itself, rather than just I want to kill the creature and take the gold. Finding and hunting down a creature and being able to feed your group when you've been dehydrated and malnutrition is also a great thing. Now here we have designing an open air dungeon. This section talks about essentially what it means, designing an open air dungeon. How do you create an adventure in an open plane? And my feeling is you just create the dungeon, except it doesn't have a roof over top of it. This is a way for you to describe to your players when they're going through these different regions, instead of having dungeon walls and caves and that kind of thing, and instead of deep diving, you're out in the open, and each open space, although it is much wider, is still your air quotes dungeon, and you can fill it with your creatures and your traps and all those kind of things. And of course, using plains and grasslands, you can fill it with all the complications that are inside. We also talk about flying creatures in open spaces, using camouflage and lures and patience to defend yourself against flying creatures if you are a plains runner type of group. We talk about ranged combat and extended range because of open fields, etc. Vincent says, I partly solve problems by saying that specific spells are higher level in certain environments. Vincent Shine also goes on to say, otherwise you could give them debuffs while eating tasteless mush. Most spells create, it can be very bad for morale. Poo says, that's not a bad idea, Vince. I like that, instead of stripping those cantrips altogether. It's right. And you can absolutely do a thing where for example, maybe the cantrip works, but it has a temporary effect. So I can use a cantrip to create some water or food, but because it is magical, when the magic goes away, you now suffer the effects of the real thing. And so now you really do need to hunt, because it's a time, it's like a ticking time bomb inside of you. So here we talk about mental stress. We have our mechanic for called despair, and we have mental stress levels similar to exhaustion, physical exhaustion. And so each level of stress causes a specific effect. So for example, the first 3 levels of mental stress, we've got shaken or shocked, distracted or forgetful for level 2, and then a numb or paranoid for level 3. And as you move up and down the mental stress level, you exchange one particular portion of mental stress for the other. So if you go down to level 5, you're frightened, but then if you move up to level 3, you now exchange frightened and are now either numb or paranoid. And then if you receive another level of mental stress down to 4, now you're suffering from hallucinations. Let's say you go up to you remove quite a few levels and you're at level 1. Now you exchange your hallucinations for being shaken or shocked, as well as loss of wisdom or intelligence. So again, those are just conditions. Vincent Shine says, like coffee, first you feel awake, later you're more tired than before. Yeah, about the temporary magic. Absolutely. And he also goes on to say, You just delay the hunger and thirst with spells, making it more severe later on. Interesting. Yes, and it could be a matter of, and you, of course, you have to talk to this with your players, but yes, absolutely do this. Of course, I'm paging down here. We have ourselves now. We go into planes hazards, and we're going to get a lot more specific. And we also have in the beginning a lot of things that are little bits of a flavor text storyline, because each of our cinematic environs is written by a fictional individual known as Artemis Hale, and he's been traveling the world to tell us about all the things that Artemis Hale has gone through and his cohorts. And so we have little flavor text and such with each one. So here we go. Poo says, by the way, DBJ, the whole PCs with flying debate just recently surfaced again. A lot of DMs straight up don't allow them. Would you be interested in making a video about how to challenge flying? Absolutely. You know what? It's on the docket. I will absolutely do this. Who wrote this? Me. Who? You mean who? Okay, Vincent Shine just says, who wrote this? I'm saying that myself, Alex, and Rob. I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing, and it is the three of us. Myself, I'm a writer. Alex is an excellent writer. Rob as well, and Rob is our editor. Alex is the layout artist. So all of this that you are seeing on your screen is laid out by Alex himself, who those two, before I even joined them, were doing excellent writing beforehand. The cinematic environments just happens to be my baby, my brainchild. So I'm the one that has been, I'm the individual who has set up the pattern that how we write, and then producing these books. This is the 8th book, by the way. Vincent Shine says, are you an outdoor person? Do you really go through these environments in real life a lot? Yes, but I am not an experienced outdoorsman. I'm city kid, born and raised. It just happens to be an addiction of mine because I'm a city kid, but I'm not a born and raised outdoors person. No, not at all. You want to talk to somebody, an outdoors person, you got to talk to Alex. Alex lives in a yurt. So, he literally lives in a home that is built and structured that is part and parcel hanging outside. So he is our survivalist guy. And I'm the cinematic one. He's the environmental one. And so we combine ourselves together. Yeah. Vincent Shine says, just use a lot of bows and range spells. As far as using flying and challenging flying, I think it's a lot more, you get a little more into it than just that. So anyway, so here we are. Let me go back up here. We do have some flavor art. We go into brambles, and brambles is just here about using pressure and foliage. This is a thick environment where we have overgrown areas, ways to change it and improve it, and things like that. We have acres and briars and stuff. Over on the side here, we have our fumble crit location. The fumble portion is if you yourself roll a 1, if you have that in your game, and then the crit is if you roll a 20 against someone else in the game, if you use that for a d20 system. Some people use a different metric. For example, if you roll 10 or less below what you need, or 10 or more above what you need. So yes, so for example, in this, if you're going through brambles and you suffer a fumble, there's like lethal choke, entangles of legs, face plant, you're caught, you're marked by scent, or you're literally pulled under. And so here we go, man, we're almost a half an hour into it, and I haven't even really paged through it. We have ourselves broken earth. Yeah, over in the chat, they're absolutely talking about like flying creatures and things like that, using winds and stuff. Believe me, the live chats that I do is literally just the note cards that I write when I'm writing. Prue says, I want something awesome and incorporating environment, which is why I asked DBJ for inspiration, Vincent, but that's just another video. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I get distracted too. Believe you me. And Alex and Rob are the ones that reel me in, because I can go kind of deep when it comes to being distracted and going. That's why I say I do a demi-daily deep dive. So here we have a broken earth, and don't apologize, guys. You guys are awesome. So we have a broken earth, and we're just talking about like nasty areas, whether it's cracked earth, heat exhaustion, suffering heat stroke, oil slicks, tar pits, heat lightning. Almost like a dead area on open plains. Here we go with some flavor art, and at the bottom here we have burial grounds, and this is a way for you to have an open area that is used for that your undead creatures or your spiritual creatures, wraiths, ghosts, banshees can hang out at, and creating a hazardous area indicative of the area of the burial grounds. So you can roll randomly on how to navigate. So we have ourselves some descriptions. Vincent Shine says, I think most creative minds do. It's a good thing for staying creative. I can't count the times where thinking about something else gave me another idea. Yeah, and I've trained myself to have I have multiple Google Docs. And when I'm thinking about one thing and get distracted, I've trained myself to just pop over to another Google Doc to start writing in the other Google Doc so that I don't lose the train of thought from one idea to the other, right? So again, here, we have ourselves with burial ground, so you can use like disturbed spirits. So somebody pick a number between 3 numbers between 1 and 12. I don't care what, you can pick all the same numbers if you want to. But any number between 1 and 12. So as the burial grounds is an idea. Let me go back up to the pic just so people can get an idea of what I'm talking about. Burial grounds is my way of number 3. Perfect. Burial grounds is my way of creating a puzzle, a trap, and a layer all at the same time in your environment. All right. So Vincent Shine says this book sounds really neat. The title sounds not very engaging, but you really pushed this one. 3, 8, and 11. So here we go. I'm going to create for you guys a puzzle, a trap, and a layer all within this environment. So your players are going through the plains. They come across the burial ground. We're going to go with number 3. So we go with number 3. This is basically disturbed spirits. This is a descriptor when the players go through and they've just disturbed these spirits. Now, mind you, this is the environment. This is not a creature. This is what they've encountered where your undead are hanging out. So each step is a choice between solid earth and a step into an abyss-filled maelstrom. So this is a descriptor. Then Prue also has an 8. This is something called, let me move over here, resisting the umbra. This is what is necessary to avoid getting caught up in the danger. So number 8 is hold a holy symbol aloft and proclaim one's faith to admonish the spirits of darkness for 1 round. This means that the player characters, in order to avoid damage, they have to hold up a holy symbol. Well, we're going to get into it. Well, perfect. It says, well, what does the maelstrom actually do? We're going to get into that part. So I call it pain and shadow. So Prue rolled an 11, and in this one, it says the slashing and cutting of razor sharp protoplasm assaults all living creatures in the area. While the players, the slashes may not be seen, the successful save or resisting the umbra will leave the area. Protected victims suffer 1d6 slashing damage unless the damage is thwarted. So in other words, if a player character decides to hold up a holy symbol and admonish the spirits, they will not suffer a die 6 of slashing damage. But if they do it, they will not suffer the damage. If they don't, they'll suffer the damage. Well, what does this mean, right? Yeah, it is cut off, because if I move it over, then I'm cutting out the chat, and I want to see what you guys are saying. So yeah, I'm sorry about that, but this is new to me because I've never actually. Let's move this over. Just see if we can move it just a little bit more. Okay. There we go. Let's hope that this works just a little bit visually. Perfect. There we go. Again, the slashing and cutting of razor-sharp protoplasm assaults all living creatures in the area. While the cuts and slashes may not be seen, successful saves, rituals to resist the Umbra, or leaving the area will protect one from harm. Victims suffer 1d6 slashing damage per round unless thwarted. There we go. Perfect. Thanks, Vince. So now you may say to yourself, well, okay, if holding up a holy symbol, that's not a big deal. Well, it is if your fighter has a shield and a sword. Which hand do they hold up the holy symbol with, right? You if you're a wizard and hey, I've got my spell book, my holy symbol out, and my staff and my spell components. Okay, which hand are you using? That's the idea, and each one is a randomizer. So that's just an example. But this book is 66 pages long, so we can go on forever with this. Again, we have burning fields. This is just where heat lightning or someone starts a fire or whatever. Somatic components, absolutely. You've got your hand occupied. Okay, so which hand you're the wizard, you need one hand for the components, the other hand's, drawing arcane symbols in the air. Which of your third hands are you holding it in your butt cheeks? Unless you're playing a comedic role, I don't think the cleric wants you to hold their holy symbol in your butt cheeks, especially trying to hold it aloft and admonish evil out of your rectum. I don't think that would be very nice. Although, believe me, if you're speaking out of your rear end, it would admonish me. So burning fields. This is like wildfires, flash fires, and there's a whole lot of problems with that too. So here we go. Here's our pressure. We have our little description about what the environment is from Artemis Hale. We have our pressure, such as, so let me read that out. A burning field can be caused by any number of circumstances: an unattended campfire, an errant lightning strike, a mistake during seasonal crop burnings, a tactical maneuver to threaten a village, a misguided spell effect. The wall of heat from a flash fire can be enough to threaten most. The fire and smoke adds to the dangers when trying to find a place to escape the creeping inferno. Be sure to stress to your players that being caught in a flash fire can be very hazardous. Having a protracted battle when the wave of fire hits may spell doom for all involved. And so that's just an example of like, hey, sure you want to fight the goblinoid hordes. Why did this move over again? There we go. So we have ourselves a number of mechanical aspects. Of course, this is 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. So we have smoke. Dealing with smoke, with vision and breathing. Let me move back up here. So we have ourselves the mechanical things about smoke. Smoke operates as a visual barrier like fog. We have breathing. Breathing in smoke is very hazardous, and the damage that is done from that. Get this chat moved over. Yes, Vincent says would be a neat cover for a sneak attack of fighting in a goblinoid horde is fighting, and they are using a flash fire with the smoke and such as a danger. And here we go with the puzzle. Do the player characters hide, knowing that the flash fire is coming? Do they run for it? If you are choking, can you do a verbal spell while you're choking? That's all in here. For example, breathing in smoke is very hazardous. A damp cloth or crawling prone can mitigate the following effects, granting advantage on Constitution saves. But that means you have to crawl prone. Do you decide to have your player crawl prone and get the advantage, or do you just run standing up as the barbarian so I can do some more damage? Every 1d4 minutes in a smoke-filled region requires a Constitution save. A failed save causes a loss of 1 Constitution, etc., etc. A stunned victim will recover after 1d4 rounds. Or your victim suffers 1 level of exhaustion, blah, blah, blah. It goes on and on. And so where are we on? Page 20-something? We got 66 pages to go. Fire. How burning fields come about. Blistering heat. Fumble crit. Let's say someone fails a roll and they roll a 1. They could get a lung full of soot. They could smell of smoke, suffer dry heaves, get a collapsed lung, constant cough. For example, if you have a constant cough, you lose bonus actions for 1d4 rounds due to the distraction of hacking and choking. You could be blinded by ash, heat, and smoke. You could be set on fire, confused, have a raw throat, teary eyes, unable to breathe, as well as trying to navigate through a fire as well. We even talk about having your things lit on fire. Still going on. We have ourselves the next part, chromatic fields. This is where you have like fields of poppy flowers of different colors, and each of them represents a danger. So, and it also talks about the finding out if what kind of flowers there are in a region, what kind of dangers there are. For example, a character can discover the effects of a specific frond with an Arcana or nature skill check, DC 18. It goes on to say any movement that disturbs the flowers will release a packet of spores. The use of dexterity or sleight of hand can mitigate the disturbing the flowers with a DC of 15. Moving at half speed or slower grants advantage on these checks. Dashing through a field of chromatic flowers will get the runner to the other side faster, but apply disadvantage when attempting to avoid hitting a sensitive flower. And the flowers, once released, the spores will fill a 30 by 30 foot cube of space. The spores remain airborne for 3 rounds and settle back to the ground, no longer effective. All of those details represent a puzzle. Do you run through it? Are you careful? Do you try to hide in the flowers? Would it be better to disturb the flowers with a gust of wind to make the spores go up? And then we have different types of spores: black spores, crystal, gray, blue, green, brown. Each of them having a different effect. Pink spores, white spores, yellow spores. Some of the spores are good, some of them are not. Removing the spores. So, for example, Vincent says, what would happen if it rains with the spores? I would say that it probably washes them away, or you could use a water effect to get them to wash away. But we also have a chart here for removing the spores. So we have things like acid, alcohol, brine, maybe charcoal. If it gets on you, milk, oil, urine, and water. So if you decide that rain actually gets the spores to go away, I would absolutely use that. I have no reason. Well, why the hell not? If someone figures out a way to get through a danger, absolutely. And we kind of go into that too. Oops, here we go. Boom. Yeah, bam. Building some sweet stuff, spore bombs. Yeah, and the spores are not necessarily all dangerous. They are modifiers. So let's pick a spore. Somebody pick a color, any basic color. Purple, yellow, orange, white, pink, something like that, brown. Give me a color, anybody. Throw it in the chat. And we'll go into it. So but the idea of the spores, again, is to layer. Here we are, maybe flying manticores or wyverns are flying overhead. Vincent says green. They're flying overhead, and then crystal, black, gray, blue, green. Here we go. This flower has a moss fringe with a mildew-colored spore sac. Those that fail a Constitution saving throw, DC 15, contract the poisoned condition. This condition causes disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. As above, additional checks may be required in a grittier setting. The spores act as a carrier. Those affected by the spores can touch a living target to poison them. This condition and the ability to poison others by touching others lasts an hour. So here you are, the individual that's affected by these spores. Let's say the barbarian runs through the spores. So if they decide to dash through the spores, they make their save to disturb the spores with disadvantage. Let's say the wizard's like, hey, look, I'm not that great. I'm just going to sneak through. They have advantage. But let's say the spores get released anyway. Vincent Shine says, do you have rules to preserve the spores? Yes, I do. I already thought about that as well. And so here you are. Let's say the barbarian gets affected by the spores. Oh, I'm poisoned. But the spores are on me and I can touch someone else to poison them. So is that a good or a bad thing? I can't make that decision for you. How about we role play it out? Let's talk about it. Let's do it. Maybe a player does Vincent Stein says the first thing the players would ask for, absolutely, once they suffer some of the harm. And then, okay, let's go start collecting some of the spores. Let's use them as a weapon. How do you know you're not in a region where the people are already using them? You don't know. So, yeah, absolutely. flash floods and floodplains. We have ourselves, alternate rules on drowning and swimming and being held underwater and moving through mud flats, including things like when you move through mud flats and you fall in the mud. If you're trying to read that scroll or read out of your spell book, you might have to take some opportunity to wipe the mud off because you can't read anything. Where do I say? The mud can obscure vision or conceal things beneath its surface. There's a 1 in 4 chance that a victim who falls will hit face forward and become blinded until spinning around to wipe the face. Parchment and scrolls covered in mud cannot be read. There is a 1 in 4 chance will affect a book or tome if held in hand at the time of a trip or fall. Glyphs or other arcane signs that must be seen must first be wiped clean before use. Even objects enchanted to glow with arcane light can be covered in thick mud. So that's just it's a ton of details like that. I'm with you, Vince. I think about these things all the time, putting those notes in and having those little complications, even if they're little complications. My point is the environment can be used and abused, and I'm all for it. Floodplains, and here we got debris, fumble crit, chaotic waters, drowning. We got fumble crit thing, crumbling earth, splitting the earth, concussion, all those things. Like, let's see, concussion. The victim is knocked unconscious by a stray branch that was caught up in a torrent. Unfortunately, their unconscious form ends up on the log, and so they are in no immediate fortunately, their unconscious form ends up on top of a log, and so they are in no immediate danger of drowning. Unfortunately, they're being carried away helplessly downstream and could end up miles away. Hopefully, the party can find them. Here we have fog and dealing with fog. Fog is not darkness, so dark vision doesn't work through fog. Fog is an actual disrupts your vision because it is a particulate. We talk about light fog, heavy fog, patchy fog, targeting people in light fog and heavy fog, targeting things randomly in fog. Here we have herds, massive herds of creatures. They are a danger to be inside of a stampeding herd if you cause them to stampede in the first place, but it is also cover from spell effects or ranged attacks or using stealth to hide inside of a herd. How much damage do you suffer by being trampled by a herd? What kind of herds are they? What damage do you do to a herd if you want to damage a herd because you are about to be stampeded? Or maybe you have adversaries that are hiding in a herd or causing a herd to stampede towards you. Vincent said, you just have to be careful not to overdo it. I knew a GM for the Dark Eye, which I've heard of the Dark Eye, and I heard it's quite lethal. And he destroyed the glass of their magic potions on a fall where their shoes when walking too long. Moderation in all things. Yes, you can overdo it. I think my opinion is to learn how to do it and then begin using it in moderation, because anything can be taken to an extreme. It's just like, oh, every creature you fight is an ancient dragon. It's just like, okay, really? So using the environment too often is good, but I feel like no one uses it at all. So I'd like to see people start moving towards the middle. So here we have herds. So we have herd. You can create your own herd in a fantasy type. So you can create, elephants or mammoths, elks, rhinos, ostriches, bison, yaks, kangaroos, giraffes. What size are they? Are they small, medium, gargantuan? What kind of ability do they have? Do they, incredible leaping? Are they slow but enduring? Are they natural swimmers? Are they marathon runners? Or do they have climbing? What kind of skin or feathers or something? So, is it black, brown, crimson, sandy? What kind of patterns do they have? What kind of colors? Do they have long straight hair that touches the ground? Do they have feathers or insectoid? What kind of herd attacks? Do they have tusks or horns? Or let's go back up here. Went past it. Sharp spines. Do they use hind legs? Or do they have massive hooves or thick cranial bone for ramming? What kind of abilities do they have? Are they sensitive to magic? Are they? Do they have predatory paranoia? Are they diviners, pack fighters? Are they spirit walkers? Do they have can they predict the weather? And then using that to fill out your realm. So Are there tribes people who follow the herd, and because the herd is specific to what they need as protection? Vincent says, yeah, it's important that it becomes interesting and not randomly destroying stuff for the PCs. Yeah, just to annoy them. Walking barefooted or having expensive potions destroyed randomly is no fun. It should be just as combat should have a purpose and be dynamic, just as social interaction should lead to something, whether it's having fun with the players and socially interacting with them, or interacting with NPC. Interacting with the environment should lead to something. It should lead to fun. And say, oh, that's cool. It should lead to drama. Oh man, we need to recover ourselves. It should lead to problem solving. Hey, we're going through something and we should think our way out of it. It should lead towards a purpose. Doing it randomly is just being vindictive and stupid. So here we have hills and valleys. Taking the high ground. What happens if you take high ground? Angled cover. Being at the top of a hill and hiding down at the top of a hill. We have our things, subjects such as like rain and snow for changes, loose stones, shifting earth, tunnels and caves. We have ourselves the heights of hills, and we have hill types. We have ourselves ramps and rises and ridges, and how to cross them. So a ramp is very shallow, whereas a ridge is so steep as to almost require both hands to remain safe, at least for humanoid creatures. Like the others, using both hands grants advantage on climbing checks or saves against being knocked prone. Again, the DC to resist falling is the total of all damage received in the round. So yes, you can climb a ridge, but if you have to use both hands, that means that fighter with a shield and sword probably has to put that away to gain advantage on the climbing check. Let's say that, well, I want to keep my shield, but I put my sword in my scabbard, so I want to get to the top of the hill. Okay, then that means you don't get advantage because you have to use both hands. It's just creating conundrums for your players and letting them decide. Here we have caves or tunnels. How big can you fit inside? Do you have to squeeze through? What happens if you squeeze into it? Vincent says, my Dungeon World campaign started with a rhino stampede. It ended out with some super weird situations, like the druid negotiating with them to leave them alone. That's awesome. Why not? Here we have a couple of tables for some details. So we have arid hill details and floral hill details. For arid hills, like gravel, pebbles, and sand are all that form these hills, or ash and carbon are all that's left from a hill burned by a lightning strike. The hills are just remnants of an ancient civilization, crumbling walls, broken pillars, and shattered monoliths. I love giving players choices because whenever anything befalls them, that's their own fault. All right, floral hills. And then we have things if you fall down a hill. So it's like broken back, knocked unconscious, concussion, dizzy, confused, nasty spill, sprains, disarmed. Like I said, like you were saying, Vincent, overdoing it can be a problem, but having the option to do it, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. Of course, we have rivers and streams. Of course, you're swimming and sailing downstream, those kind of things, resisting the pull of the water. We can't forget tall grass. Got to hide down in there as well. Wheat, corn, grass, brush, foliage, hiding inside of it. What happens with ranged attacks? How about using it to help your stealth? What if your adversaries are also hiding in the tall grasses? Perception checks, using survival to navigate through it. Here we go with wind and weather. Can't forget wind and weather. Breezes. Of course, it goes from breezes to gusts of wind. Using what happens if you are a flying creature and the wind affects you. We have rain and rain affecting fire and putting fire out. Rain can lead to floodplains, thunderstorms. Vincent says there's also a difference if you want to warn them or make their life more complicated or interesting, instead of just taking something from them with no choice or engagement involved. Exactly. It here could be a choice of, okay, it's going to become windy and raining. You have a choice. You can push through getting there faster, or you can wait out the storm, but your adversaries will surround you. What do you want to do? And then just leaving it up to them, and then not punishing them specifically like, oh, I expected you to make a certain decision. Instead, it's make a decision and then just live with the consequences. So if they push through the rain and the thunderstorm and such, maybe they're miserable, but they avoid being surrounded. And then their adversary is like, oh, I was hoping they would wait. And then the adversary may have to push through as well. We have a winter's wrath. And so, of course, we have snow, cold, frostbite, pressure, recovering from frostbite, pushing through snow, you know, trying to, yeah, and the wind is also dangerous to fly, of course. Being blown off course, being knocked out of the air, not being able to use ranged attacks that have a solid core to them, like arrows or javelins. Wind blows out fires, that kind of thing. We have with frozen area here, we have blizzards, ice, hidden crevices, freezing liquids. Like here, most common liquids will freeze solid in Arctic climates. These can include healing potions, drinking water, and other liquids that might be of value. The GM must decide if the liquid can still be used once melted or it has any reduced effects. This may also apply to spells that create liquid materials, such as grease or create water or summon water elemental. Flames can melt snow and ice, although once the heat is removed, additional hazards may be created with slick, icy surfaces. And then here we go into the appendix. We have ourselves a plains runner, and everything that has to do with the plains runner. So personality, ideals. Their feature is called sprints and marathons, which allows them to double the distance when doing a forced march, and some other details, as well as using learning new weapon proficiency, such as the bolo, boomerang, or lasso. And then they have equipment such as a bull roarer, soft shoes, a stone hunting knife, things like that, sack of salt. Vincent says, what a lot of persons don't think about, wind is super cold, drops the temperature a lot. Hell yeah. Yeah, hell yeah. I work outside. I'm a letter carrier, so yeah, it's pretty nasty. It's very nasty. So here we have new weapons in our appendix. So we have the use of a lasso, a bolo, which is very similar to a net, use of a boomerang, use of a meteor hammer, which is essentially like a stone wrapped in rope or hemp. We have spring loaders, which are like spring-powered firearms, essentially. Of course, we have some descriptive artwork with the boomerang and things like that, meteor hammer, lasso, and a bolo. We have our appendix 2, where we talk about pets, mounts, and familiars, and incorporating them into the game, how to incorporate them using the options such as having them fade into the background, or considering how many actions they have. If they have a ranger has a pet wolf, and the wizard has a pet falcon, and the cleric is riding on, a pet, a mounted bison or something, et cetera, et cetera. Using forced march, using mounts as hit point sponges, whether you should or shouldn't, whether mounts and pets are unique versus ubiquitous, whether they're very common, and so your adversaries would have them as well. So if you're being hunted by settlers or a tribe, they might use hunting dogs or something. Travel paces and using perception when moving fast or slow, riding and mounted combat, and a ton of rules for that. So, for example, using this is a perfect book if you want to use a player wants to be a centaur, or they want to be a mounted knight. You want to be a mounted ranger, or you want to be open air. This is everything that has to deal with it. So we have, giving actions declaring actions for your mount. So it's dashing and disengaging, dodging, opportunity attacks. Oh man, training your animal, the types of tricks that they can do, how many tricks they can do, how difficult it is to train them. So we have help, guard, come, fetch, deliver, patrol, scavenge, perform an action. The kinds of combat that happens when you are in a mounted situation, whether you are on foot and your opponent is mounted, or any combination. So someone who is drawn and quartered, thrown from a thrown rider, charging with a weapon, trying to, you have an untamed mount, flying leap. Vincent says, aren't these rules already included in D&D 5e? Yes, they are. So there is some slight reprint. So there's basically like a paragraph like, hey, these are the rules. The rest of the rules are not. So for example, in mounted combat, it does talk about like attack and then disengage, etc. But as far as like charging with a weapon, throwing a rider, training your mount, using and going into detail about opportunity attacks, and giving hints on how to use that to your benefit, or adversaries using it against you, is not in D&D 5e. So the answer is yes. The additional answer is no. So yes, like for example, like, it's just like anything. Is combat in 5e? Yes. Am I reprinting the combat rules? Hell no. I'm not reprinting the mounted rules and just leaving it as is. It is literally like, here's the literal basics of mounted combat, and oh, by the way, here's like 5 pages of describing it. So it's so you don't have to flip through you don't need 5 books to use it, if that makes sense. Vincent says, it is not really clear to me what is new and what is not, to be honest. It's because, okay, let me give you an example. Go up to the top, give you a specific thing. Here we go. Let's go to, all right. Mounted combat. There is 1, 2, 3. I wouldn't say 3, maybe 3 lines. So let's see. A willing creature that is at least 1 size larger than you has an appropriate anatomy, can serve as a mount. That's from 5e. Mounting and dismounting. Once during your move, you can mount or dismount a creature that is 5 feet from you. That is from 5e. That's it. That literally is it from the 5th edition. The rest of it is what myself and Alex and Rob have written. So speed mounting, prone and knocked down while mounting, issuing orders, opportunity attacks. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Opportunity attacks are in 5e. It says you can make an opportunity attack when a hostile creature that you see moves out of your reach. And then the rest of it is us. Give me 2 seconds. All right, baby. All right, love you. The rest of it is us. So you can avoid opportunity attacks by taking disengage action. A mount can take the disengage action. Your mount acts on your initiative either before or after you. The mount can then be used to avoid placing yourself in harm's way. It goes into, so it's more like, here's a couple of lines. This is from the 5th edition, so you don't have to read the whole book. And then we go into just one page down. How to use it, drawing and quartering, how to have a fight, using weapons, throwing people from their mounts, using weapons, having, flying leap, flying tackle, disrupting a rider, being dragged, arm scoop. So none of that's 5th edition. Lean over, breeding, animal care, healing animals, keeping them passive, behavioral traits, et cetera, et cetera. It's exactly, essentially what it is exactly like if I had I'm sorry. Vincent says, it's just confusing to me when I don't know what is new. I would cross-reference it with core 5e book to see what has changed. Absolutely. It's not Okay, let me be clear. We're not anything that is quote unquote changed is not changed. It's here's the rule, and there's like a line or two, and then it's either here's an option or let's explore what is available so you understand what you're doing. So, for example, if you're riding um, a mount and someone says, well, I'm going to do that trick that the Native Americans, the indigenous people used to do, and lean to the side and use my horse as a barrier so it hits the horse instead of me. There's no rule in the game about that. So we go into those things. I want to do a flying leap off of my horse to jump across the crevice, and there's no rule in the game. So we go deeper into like, oh, here's a way how you would adjudicate that. Just like anything else, whether it's combat or social interaction. If you have an adventure, you would do the same thing. Prue says it's just elaboration, not exactly chances. Have a nice day, DBJ. Hope your foot is better. I got a cortisone shot directly into my ankle, which the cortisone shot, that's a pretty damn deep needle, but I'm not feeling any pain. I probably have to go back, it says between 3 and 6 months when it starts to wear off. So yeah. I feel the click, but I don't feel the grinding glass. Exactly. Yeah, it changes. No, I'm not changing anything. It's just it's a book that you don't have to keep flipping through another book. I mean, sure, I would absolutely this like all the other 7 books that we've released, you can absolutely compare them side by side, right? Like, oh well, here's my player's handbook, or here's my dungeon master's guide, and here's my book. And then you can say, I'm going to put one book away and just use whatever is in the other book. Take it or leave it. Okay, so we have behavioral traits for mounts or pets. Use that as an option. The death of a pet and how it can affect someone. If you wish to add that into the game, acquiring a pet, and how to acquire that pet, training them, etc. Vincent says, are rules in the game about riding without using your hands? Horse Archer from the Mongols used it at all time. Learned about how it works recently. I would. There are no specific rules for riding without using your hands. I would say that would be your skill. Okay, to be fair, I would include details as deep as that. But I'm writing this with 2 other people who, have to mitigate me. They have to rein me back in because I can get so deep that sometimes you could get to the point where it's like, okay, so we're riding with a saddle or without a saddle. We're riding with our hands, without our hands. We're riding on giant birds. How are giant birds different than 4-legged creatures and stuff? Now I would put that in here. That can get a little deeper. So a lot of that, I mean, we mentioned using the animal handling skill. As far as how good or bad you are, a person, yeah, it becomes too complicated too fast. Yeah, mind you, we do have a book called Survival, and in it we have like 20 different methods for um, for preserving the food, meats and veggies and fruits that you found out in fields. Like we even have a ton of rations categorized by racial types. So for like dwarves versus dragonborn versus goblins versus tiefling versus elves. It's I mean, like somebody's got to say, DBJ, you really need to rein that shit back in. And so yeah, we got some things: tack and harness, die rolls, when doing contests, doing chases, theater of the mind, using distances and using extended contests, random chase obstacles and creating random chase obstacles. So for example, somebody give me 2 numbers between 1 and 12. any numbers between 1 and 12, and we're just going to create a random chase obstacle. So you're chasing the orc chieftain who's kidnapped a villager, or maybe the orc raiders are riding on their wargs and they're chasing you through the undergrowth. So Vince comes out with a 7 and a 3. So so right now we're just going to make a um, random obstacle. So for your 7, we have a maze of naked trees. So the party, both the adversaries and the players, are mounted and they're going through a chase of uh, grove of naked trees. And the result in failing an animal handling check would be the next the next attack against the victim has advantage. So in other words, the player character, you're describing this action. They're riding on their animals. They're chasing or being chased, and when they go through this zone, they have to make a skill check. And if they fail the skill check, the next attack against them has advantage. And of course, these are random, so you can mix and match anything you want with a descriptor and the damage. And the DC can be says the DM can roll a D10 plus 10 for a random DC, or pick easy, medium, or hard level of difficulty to succeed. So when you're stuck for something and you're like, I don't know what to do. Okay, here's something random. So, and that's throughout the book, of course, as we're going through. And then there's, of course, the fumble crit, such as your weapon damages your mount, you're knocked off of mount and knocked out of your harness and fall prone. Your mount is blinded by something such as a cloak, dust, or reflected sunlight, et cetera, et cetera. And the fumble crit means that either you made a crit and this happens to your target, or you fumbled and it happens to you, etc. So, shit, are we towards the end? Yeah. We're always at the end. And so, almost done. Damn, over an hour. All right, so we have new creatures. Here we are. We're more traditional stuff. New creature, huge beasts, unaligned beasts. Here we go with boom. The Groot slang, another creature. Take a good look. You might think it's an elephant, but it's not. It's got tusks and various appendages on its face. Some details about them. Their game stats. Their purpose in a like a plains type setting, mercenaries, etc. Plains worms, they are smaller but more numerous than purple worms. Because they're only challenge rating 2. Well, only, whatever. And then we end with random details. Vincent says, good mention to make interesting new animals, just mix 2 together, like they do in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Yeah, it's just some added detail. And like you said, you made a point about like, am I just reprinting the rules? Am I adding something new? And my opinion is, the answer would be yes and no. I'm reprinting literally, like there's no detail in it. It's just, okay, here's the rule, you fall prone, or here's the rule, this is what it takes to jump, or here's the rule, make an animal handling check. And then the rest of the book is all details, so that you don't have to go back and forth between like your player's handbook. It's just, here's a ton of information to reference to go, oh, I know how to make this interesting and throw this in. So we have random details, how to add them into the thing. So we've got like blade grass, boneyards, tumbleweed, and dangerous tumbleweed. This tumbleweed actually grabs you and tumbles you away. So it says, while the majority of the seemingly dry and dead weed is a benign nuisance, plainsfolk are aware of its deadly cousin. Tumbleweed is a hollow ball of spiny vines. It rolls with the wind, snatching up unsuspecting creatures. And then there's a bunch of details with that. So yeah, you can fight someone and kick them into the tumbleweed. You could dodge around the tumbleweed. Maybe you want to get away by diving into the tumbleweed and hope you can get yourself out of it. Maybe the tumbleweed rolls people down a hill and puts them into maybe a raging river. You can play with that. We've got dust bowls, pits, erosion stones, pollen clouds, fallen, logs, prickly plants, haven trees, spines, rocky plateaus. Vincent says, for me, at least, I wouldn't need so much rulings. I just dig the ideas. I got pretty good at coming up with rules on the fly. Honestly, I'm the same way. Like, I don't necessarily need random tables, but I read random tables to go, oh, I know what to do with this. Oh, or, oh, someone asked this question. Oh, here's an idea. So I'm the same way, but some people are different. So we try to offer something just a little bit for everybody. Shallow beasts, tunnels, random. And then, of course, we end with random details. So instead of just describing things as it is a flat plain with grass, the grass is green and there is a sun shining, we have a ton of ideas just to spark things for an imagination, such as horizon details that you see from a distance, ephemeral details such as sounds or smells or feelings, natural details, and constructed landmarks. Vince says, I like random tables because it forces you to improvise and make up interesting stuff on the fly. Also, you can make your own random tables. Hell yeah. And that's why they're really popular. Random tables, deck of cards that have random things in them, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we're at the end. Shit, damn, an hour, 15 minutes. Okay. We are at the end of the book. So let me stop sharing. Boom. Let's go to my ugly mug. And there we go. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Okay. I kind of wanted to do a page through, talk to you guys, let people know what's going on. It is the 8th book in our release. Let me see if I can reach down here. Bam. So it's the 8th book. We've got a number of these for each environment. Kind of see them here. So eventually, every natural environment will be put together into one compendium. What do you say? Been starting to distract y'all. Honestly, how I feel is like it's kind of like it's just hanging around the game table, dude. I don't really look at it like that. Like, I don't like, oh my God, I'm off point. It's more like, oh man, hand me another slice of pizza kind of thing. So yeah, yes, I get distracted. No, I don't write like I'm distracted. That's for the other guys to rein me in and go, hey, these are great ideas. These other things are terrible ideas. And that's what we go through. So anyway, it's the 8th book. We have, so far we have Arctic. Let's go through. This is plains and grasslands, but we also have, yeah, I just wanted to get through the book. Yeah, exactly. Because not too many people want to hang around with me for an hour, let alone 10 minutes. But we have Arctic depths, Arctic lands, aquatic depths, survival, aerial reaches, which is actually far more. Aerial reaches is more arcane. Using the environment with flying contraptions. No, this book is not a book on creating flying contraptions. It is a book in the environment of using flying things. So storms and rains and winds and chromatic clouds and all that kind of stuff. Having chases, fighting on complications when fighting with air pirates and things like that. Blasted Lands is another book. Mountains, deserts, and desert wastes are the current releases. We will absolutely have do jungles and swamps, subterranean, etc. There's another one that I'm missing off the top of my head because I don't have it in front of me. So anyway, guys, I want to thank you for joining me. Yes, very long, but I did want to give kind of like a page through in what we do and what it is that the cinematic environments encompasses. All the other details will be listed below. If you want to continue the discussion, join the Discord group. I will poke my head in here and there, give talk about different things, etc. What's coming up, for example, placid on the front page of my YouTube channel are the adventure keys. These are like 3 or 4 page adventures. They're going to come out on the D6 and the D12. D6 day 6 and the D20 D12 Jesus D6 and D20 because we're critical hit, so we got to release something on day 20, right? They're going to be pretty cheap, $1.50. Really pay what you want. The first one's for release right now. They are adventures with options, so there's like optional creatures, optional threats, optional NPCs, so they can be used over and over again, and then you can use them and insert them into your own world. So they are pretty agnostic. I mean, yes, they are 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I'm saying that their setting elements are agnostic. All right, I've talked a shitload. So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you. Oh, by the way, Vince and anybody else out there, do not hesitate to be critical. Because it challenges me. I'm not one of those people who's just like, oh my God, like you're questioning everything I do, because the only way we, meaning me, the royal we, gets better is basically that we get asked the hard questions, and then I love answering them. So, for example, we're going to do flying creatures for one of my Third Pillar Thursdays. Vince says, does it have rules for dealing with flying PCs? Yes. So, for example, like dealing with, so for like the aerial book, it deals with dive attacks, ascending, chases, stunts, falling out of the air, recovering yourself out of the air, PCs versus not flying PCs versus PCs on the ground, et cetera, et cetera. So, yes, flying is very powerful. I know people just they lose their minds. But my question about, if you allow a PC with flight, why are they the only ones flying in the like how unique is flying in your world? If you have a race of creatures that fly, then there's going to be other things that fly. And if you're the only one flying, you're a target, right? If you're yeah, I don't understand that. So we'll talk about that next Third Pillar probably. So anyway, I am DBJ. I'm going to have to cut it here. Thanks, Vince, because you get me going on. Shit, I wish I could take you with you as we can keep on talking about this, but people have to go. So I'm DBJ. Everything relevant is going to be listed below. So if you want to join our Critical Hit Facebook group to get updates, you can. Join the Discord group if you wish, etc., etc. Vince, have a good one. Prue, see you later. Thanks for joining me. I know you guys are busy. Have a good one. Bye.